Hi, and welcome to That's Ready Mysterious. Join me for an intriguing look into real-life mysteries. Who was the mad gasser of Mattoon? What was whaling at the Wilga waterhole? I'm not going to solve those mysteries, but they'll be interesting to learn about. I'm your host, Kelly with an I. Transcripts and references for all episodes can be found at that'sreadymysterious.wordpress.com. No apostrophe and no exclamation point. Today's tale is about Andy the Goose. Hastings is known for Kool-Aid, said Jean Fleming, but before they really promoted that cause, it was Andy the Goose. It put the town on the map. Andy was a gray goose born without webbed feet in 1987. He lived in the small town of Hastings in south-central Nebraska. In 1988, Jean Fleming met Andy when visiting his sister-in-law Donna Mae Shuck's farm. At the time, Andy was known as Rock and Roll. Fleming knew he had to take Rock and Roll home. He traded his sister-in-law 2 healthy geese for Rock and Roll and his mate Polly. Fleming explained that because he was a Shriner, it was his natural instinct to try and help the goose. The first thing Fleming did was try to make a skateboard for Rock and Roll to help him get around. The skateboard was a failure. Then Fleming found a solution. He gave Rock and Roll a pair of patent leather baby shoes, size 0, stuffed with foam and rubber. By the time Fleming's granddaughter Jessica came home from school, Rock and Roll was running around the yard in his new shoes. Soon after, the Flemings renamed Rock and Roll Andy. Jean Fleming was an inventor. In 1959, he noticed that cows were scratching themselves on any rough surface they could find and ripping open their skin. He invented a cow scratcher for them that also sprayed them with bug repellent. Fleming made hundreds of thousands of the cow scratchers and sold them to farms. The Fleming homestead was an old Navy ammunition depot that Jane and his wife Nadine had renovated. In the 1970s, they moved their son and daughter-in-law onto the compound. A few years later, the couple had their daughter Jessica. Jessica Fleming was at an age where she was constantly embarrassed by her family when Jean found Andy. She says she never could have expected Andy to go viral and then to lose him so quickly. She certainly did not expect to be trying to solve his murder 25 years later. Gary Johansson was Jean's friend and worked at the Hastings Tribune. He wrote about Andy in an October 10, 1988 article titled Goose Steps in Style. Quickly afterward, Andy went 1980s viral. Jessica explained that they had newspapers from all over the world getting into contact with them and wanting them to tell stories about Andy. Andy appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. He was profiled in Reader's Digest. People did a photo spread in January of 1989. When Nike found out that Andy liked to wear their brand of baby shoes, they sent him a carton of them. This was most likely the first time a goose got a major sponsorship deal. Jean would drive around with Andy in the passenger seat of his car, touring libraries, schools, county fairs, and parades. The pair especially liked attending disability-focused events. Andy was declared an honorary ambassador of the local Chamber of Commerce. Fleming started a fan club for Andy and printed out certificates that he mailed out to kids who wrote Andy letters. Jessica explained that Andy was a very special goose. She said that he was sweet-natured and described him as just literally a nice bird. She said that he seemed to be grateful to Jean. On the morning of October 20th, 1991, Jean and Nadine Fleming received a phone call. The caller asked if Andy was okay. Hastings resident Leo Stoller had been metal detecting in the local park when he came across the body of a dead goose. The goose was wearing baby Nike sneakers. It had been decapitated and its wings had been cut off. The shoes were left on. Chautauqua Park was about 10 miles from the Fleming homestead. The goose was found near the baseball diamond. The Flemings ran out to Andy's hutch only to find 2 sets of human footprints, bigger than size 0, in the dirt. There was blood on the door and a box on the concrete floor. Andy's mate Polly was also gone. After Andy was killed in his pen, he was driven to a second location and decapitated, plucked, and then finally driven to Chautauqua Park for disposal. The killing quickly became national news. The Chamber of Commerce of Hastings set up a reward fund to find out what happened to Andy. They raised around $8,000 while the previous record had been $100. When the reward went unclaimed, it was donated to a children's shelter and to get school library books. Ron Grossman of the Chicago Tribune returned to the town of Hastings in June of 1993. Sheriff Greg McGee told him that Andy's case was still open and that they were following up on every tip. Jean buried Andy in the backyard. A local granite company donated a headstone which is still at the Fleming homestead. Soon afterward, Jean began showing signs of Alzheimer's disease. Jessica said, "In retrospect, I think it was Andy who had kept him here with us for a lot longer." Jean tried to get a bronze memorial to Andy made, but it never materialized. Jean died on New Year's Eve in 1999 in a nursing home in Grand Island, Nebraska. Years later, Jessica Fleming, now Corgi, began combing through her grandparents' papers. She read through fan mail in her grandmother's notebooks and looked at crime scene photographs. She called around to people who were important to the case and began noticing inconsistencies, especially around the status of the case as unsolved. She explained that some people said that the perpetrator had been found. She called the former Chamber of Commerce president, Don Reynolds, who confirmed to her that the case had been closed. He said, "About 2 years after the murder, someone from the sheriff's department called and said, 'Well, we found out who did it, but we can't tell you, and we don't want to have any news release about it.' We didn't know what to do. Finally, we donated the reward to our community foundation, which used it for kids' projects." He went on to say that the police department had told him it was somebody that was not responsible, suggesting to him that it may have been someone who was not in control of their actions. Today, Jessica runs the website andythegoose.com, which contains updates on the case. She explained that she doesn't need to know the name of the person who committed the murder anymore. She just wants to know why Andy was killed. Chief Ruberson told a Hastings resident that he believed that Jean was a culprit. Corgi says that her grandfather wouldn't have killed Andy. According to a letter Jessica found in her grandparents' possessions, Fleming was in a feud with two local brothers, Bill and Jack Gorman. The brothers had been selling scrap found on Fleming's property and giving Jean some of the money. Jean had seen a box that they had not told him about, and they thought Jean was accusing them of stealing. This matches a story told by someone that worked at the junkyard, and he said that the brothers bragged of killing Andy. The letter was never sent. The author of an article in The Intelligencer believes that Jean may have been the culprit. The author said that Jean's business was failing, and he possibly wanted the fame that came along with Andy to continue. There are two main theories as to why Andy was killed. The first is that it was an attack on disabled people everywhere. Andy had become a symbol for those with prostheses. The second was that it was a political assassination. Andy had been elected honorary mayor of a neighboring town. Jean Fleming told the Chicago Tribune, "Geese are mean creatures that like to sneak up on you when you're bent over and give you a good bite in the you-know-what. But Andy was so grateful for what we'd done for him. He was the nicest, sweetest guy you ever met." Who killed Andy the Goose? And why did they do it? What do you think? Leave a comment and let me know what you think. Thanks for listening to today's episode of That's Ready Mysterious. Join me next week for another captivating mystery.